きまして、米国代表講演として、シカゴ大学プレシジョン医療研究センターセンター長教授で、世界のがん医療のトップランナーでいらっしゃるマーク・J・ラテイン様よりご講演いただきます。テーマは、米国が描くがん撲滅戦略2022です。本日はイスラエルでの講義のため、事前に収録した VTR 映像でご覧いただきます。それではよろしくお願いいたします。
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Ratain. I'm a professor at the University of Chicago, and I'm delighted to be able to speak to you today, albeit from Chicago. I wish I could be in Osaka with you all. And I very much appreciate the organizers asking me to speak again on my thoughts about trends in cancer treatment. So I would like to talk about really the issue that is most important to me, which is the opportunity to improve the lives of patients with cancer, living with cancer, by reducing side effects as well as costs. And this really relates to the notion that we've just been giving excessive doses of drugs to patients with cancer. This was recognized by the US Food and Drug Administration and published last year in a prominent journal, the New England Journal of Medicine, The Drug Dosing Conundrum in Oncology, When Less is More. And this has led to changes at the US FDA in the oncology group, what is a change that's now known as Project Optimus, requiring that all companies must optimize the dose of their drug prior to receiving full approval. This has also been of interest in Japan, and as I discussed with you last year, have been published studies of drugs, and this is one of the studies I showed last year, a study led by Dr. Murai of the drug dasatinib, an important drug for chronic myeloid leukemia, showing that instead of giving 50 milligrams twice a day, you can use just 20 milligrams once a day with the same benefit and less side effects and potentially lower costs. This is now of increasing interest not only to FDA, but to many stakeholders in the United States in oncology. So the American Society of Clinical Oncology convened a virtual workshop in collaboration with the Food and Drug Administration in May of this year called Getting the Dose Right, Optimizing Dose Selection Strategies. And this is available online for those of you who might wish to see it. I'm one of the founders of the Optimal Cancer Care Alliance, and our slogan is optimal dosage, best outcome. And we convened a meeting also in May of this year. And one of the speakers was Dr. Noro from Nippon Medical School, who just gave a brief overview of Japanese reduced dose trials and discussed 3 completed trials in lung cancer. 2 are of pills, afatinib and erlotinib, both drugs used to treat the disease in patients that have mutant EGFR. And then the 3rd trial was of a chemotherapy drug, nab-paclitaxel. And this is now of increasing interest around the world. I'm showing you here a news article from June of this year from the Times of India. Low-cost head and neck cancer therapy that can prolong life. Well, we have lots of low-cost cancer therapies, but most of them are not very effective. What's really important here is that they utilize low doses of a very important drug, nivolumab, marketed under the brand name Opdivo. This drug was originally developed at Ono in collaboration with Bristol Myers Squibb, and it has multiple indications, and The trial that was done in India was in patients with recurrent or metastatic head and neck cancer, for which the usual dose is about 200 milligrams per day, 3 milligrams per kilogram body weight, administered every 2 weeks. And here's the results of the study as they were presented at the American Society for Clinical Oncology meeting. This study gave half the patients chemotherapy and half the patients nivolumab, but it gave them 1/10 of the standard dose of nivolumab, and demonstrated that a marked improvement in survival, an improvement in survival that is similar to what is usually seen with the full dose. In parallel, the United States Congress, equivalent to the Japanese diet, has taken an interest in dosing optimization. And in conjunction with the fiscal year 2023 appropriations to fund the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, our Senate Appropriations Committee has specifically called on the Food and Drug Administration to conduct dosing optimization studies. And here's some excerpts from that report. It says the committee is concerned about the escalating cost of specialty cancer drugs and biologics. I think the same is true in Japan. The committee strongly encourages FDA to organize clinical trials, which is, of course, the diet could strongly encourage PMDA to organize such trials to assess whether dosing and frequency adjustments may decrease the cost of care and or toxicities of treatment without compromising efficacy. So in the United States, we have no formal mechanism to assess cost effectiveness. In contrast, Japan has C2H, a department of NIPH that was established in 2018. And this is a relatively new entity that has not yet issued reports on the drugs I've been speaking about today, but there's certainly the opportunity for assessments looking at the cost effectiveness at both the standard dose and at lower doses where the cost would be lower. So let's take one example. Let's go back to Opdivo, and I showed you the clinical trial conducted in India. And you can see the projected sales in Japan for Opdivo are $155 billion for this year. And you can see that this includes a number of different diseases. NSCLC is lung cancer, RCC is kidney cancer, HNN is head and neck cancer, GC, gastric cancer or stomach cancer, ESC is esophageal cancer. So there's a number of diseases here, but the total comes to projection of $155 billion. Now, if you apply the results of this study, and in my opinion, they can be applied not only to head and neck cancer, but to all diseases, giving 1/10 of the standard dose, well, that changes the forecast to 15.5 billion yen. And so there's an immense opportunity for those that have to pay for drugs, as well as risks to those who sell drugs at excessive doses. The most recent example is one I again spoke about with you last year on the drug sotorasib, a drug that is approved for a subtype of lung cancer, those that have mutations in a gene called KRAS. It's about 1 in 8 lung cancers have this mutation. And the drug was developed by Amgen Pharmaceuticals. It was approved in May of last year at a dose of 960 milligrams administered daily. Now, it comes in 120 milligram tablets, so patients have to take 8 at a time. And when the FDA approved the drug, they said, well, we're not sure that the dose is right. In fact, they actually said, we're pretty sure the dose is not right. And they told the company they were required to conduct a trial comparing 8 pills at a time to 2 pills at a time. This drug was approved in Japan earlier this year. The Japanese price has not been disclosed, but we know what the official US price is. The list price is $89.50 per tablet, which works out for the US $716 per day, or $21,480 per month. And that's the list price. That's the price, for example, that our government pays to the company for Medicare patients. I have seen one forecast that the projected Japan peak sales are 30 billion yen, assuming that the price in Japan would be less than half the US price. Now, I also told you about the trial that is ongoing that was required by the US Food and Drug Administration that is likely to demonstrate that you can give 1/4 the standard dose, which would reduce the cost by 75% and therefore reduce Japanese peak sales to 7.5 billion yen if the recommended dose is lowered to 240 milligrams per day by PMDA as a result of that FDA-required study. So this is a very important trend. And in fact, it was the sotorasib story that really catalyzed Project Optimus and really was highlighted in this important paper published last year on less is more. So here are my conclusions and recommendations. I know many of you are patients. Cancer patients should ask their physicians whether they have considered prescribing lower doses of drugs, particularly for those drugs whose dose has not been optimized. US patients are starting to speak up and ask these questions and are demanding evidence that the dose is right. Regulatory authorities around the world should require dose optimization of all new oncology drugs. The US Food and Drug Administration has made this a requirement. I hope that the PMDA will do the same. And studies of lower doses of marketed drugs should be a high priority, ideally funded and organized by government agencies, because we have many, many drugs that are already on the market for which the dose is excessive. And it's the government that has the best opportunity and the most to gain by organizing and funding these trials. So thank you for listening to me, and I hope next year I can be in Osaka with you.
マーク・J・ラテイン様のご講演でした。ありがとうございました。